Thank you for joining us today. Our conversation is with Dr. Bradley McDaniels, who is an assistant professor at the University of North Texas. He studies quality of life issues and Parkinson's.
We have a lot of fun today. They will hear about Brad's research and the conversations he's had with many Parkinson's patients.
So stay with us.
Thanks for joining us. Today we're very fortunate to be talking to Bradley McDaniels from
University of North Texas. Dr.
McDaniels.
And I just mumbled that. Sorry. Sorry, Brad.
It's good. It's all right.
Thanks for joining us today, Brad. It's great to have you.
So happy to be here. Thanks for the call. And, through our conversation, this stuff is near and dear to my heart. It's not just a job for me. This is a purpose. It's a passion. It's a calling. And, we just want to make the difference in people's lives. It's that simple.
That's why we have these conversations, because we love meeting people like you that are passionate for the community and really do want to make a difference. And that's what I think is so motivational about the conversations that we've had. And some of them, with people that have that same passion, and they do not have the disease, and they don't have a family member personally affected, but they're still extremely passionate about making a difference.
One of the first questions I was thinking about when I was going to talk to you was something. You're a very good person to ask this question. I have this theory, and I need to ask doctor friends all the time. Do you see, with all the people you've met with Parkinson's, do you see a personal or a profile of what people that seem to get Parkinson's, whether it's psychological or physical, but the background or the personality type? Do you see any correlation?
It's funny that you asked that question. The short answer is no. But in working with Indu Subramanian and Greg Pontone, we've been talking about the big five personality traits, right? Of optimism, resilience, extroversion. I'm losing my train of thought. But anyway, I lost what they were. But we've been considering, are there some of those that are more associated with people who get PD? It's an interesting question, because these personality traits are things that are kind of ingrained versus a state like happiness, right? You can be happy one minute and sad the next. But a trait like optimism is typically something that is part of a person's personality. And so we don't know the full answer to that yet. So it is interesting, because anytime we could come up with something that precedes Parkinson's, that's a win, right? Because the whole goal of everything that we do is finding something that we can address that can reduce the potential of getting Parkinson's disease down the road. And that's always a goal. So I don't think that there's a commonality between people. There's so many characteristics that determine whether someone gets PD. Is it genetic? Yeah. Is it environmental? Yeah. Right. I mean, but which is it? Well, it's both, right? It's epigenetic. And so that's the struggle. Is now, if I begin to think about, are there characteristics of people who thrive despite their Parkinson's disease, I would say yes to that. And these are these personality traits of resilience, hope, optimism, self-efficacy, a belief that I can do something, right? Self-efficacy is another big area that we're looking at right now, because, if you think you can't do something, odds are pretty good you're not going to try it. So your doctor says, hey, I think you should go to Rock Steady Boxing. And you say, there's no way I can do that. You're not going to go. And so this whole thing of self-efficacy, but people who have those characteristics, thrive despite Parkinson's disease, right?
do those people have those before, or are they capable of gaining that, or is that a resilience that they had before they had Parkinson's?
That's another one of those weird questions that the answer is yes, both before and after, right? But the great thing about something like resilience and self-efficacy and purpose, meaning those things can be engendered in someone. You can develop those if you don't have them. And that's the great thing is you meet someone and they've been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and they've just given up. And they go, and we see this, right? You get the day that you walk out of the movement disorder doc's office and you've been told, I think you have Parkinson's disease. If you're like my mom, at that moment, she didn't hear anything else that happened after that. And there are a lot of things that happen. There's reactive depression, there's anxiety, there's fear, there's demoralization that just flood you. Yeah, Angie.
Well, I was going to say if your mom heard the words chronic degenerative with no cure, which my friend sitting next to me, my husband did. Talk about demoralizing.
Which was actually the second question I was going to ask you.
Brad's reading your notes through Zoom.
Yeah, right.
But that sets the stage, and I know a lot of the newer docs do not, use those words, but those words are still neurodegenerative. I mean, they're still out here.
And what's that mean, right? If you don't know anything about medicine and somebody says neurodegenerative, if I said that to my wife, she's like, I don't even know what that word means. And most don't if you've never been exposed, unless you work in the field, right?
Right. But they do understand the words no cure. That's the one that scares the Jesus out of them. Yeah. The fear.
And the little things that happen, like that I think about what might go through your mind. And Karl, maybe you relate. In your mind, you go, so now what? Life's over as I know it. What about my work? What about my relationships? What about my role in my family? What about my social functioning? All of these things.
What's next?
Right. And so it's no wonder that people get reactive depression and they get anxious and they get fearful. They get angry, right? I get it.
Well, try being told you have, I got my results on a Friday from a nurse over the phone. We're treating you for Parkinson's. Well, that's how I found over the phone from a nurse, and he'll see you on Monday. So
and this was before the internet. So you're sitting at home.
So I had Saturday and Sunday thinking, what the hell is Parkinson's? I don't know anything. I know it's not good. And
now what?
He and the doctor's not available. I'll see you on Monday, and we'll throw some pills at you, and you can come back and see us, and see what happens. Well, that's not a great way to start the relationship with your doctor.
It's a poor model of care, right? Yeah. And when I did all my grad work at the University of Kentucky, and the guy that ran the movement disorders clinic there, named John Slevin, when he had a gal that worked for him who was young onset Parkinson's, and she had an office right next to his. And every time he diagnosed someone new, they left his office and went into her office. And it was such a great model. And I think Bass does this over in the Netherlands, right? They've got such a better system than what we have here, no question, right? And you guys know this. But you could go into her office and now you get a chance to decompress and go, all right, what did I just hear? And she can say, this is what Parkinson's disease is. Here are the resources that I have for you. Here are websites that are reputable where you can go. Here's a book about things that you want to know, right? I mean, all of the things that sometimes when you're newly diagnosed, you're madly searching for. And where do you go? My mom wouldn't have known where to go. I mean, you go to Wikipedia. That's not a great source, right?
Well,
No, and it has that picture we were just talking about a few minutes ago of the guy, you know.
when I was diagnosed, when I was diagnosed in '91, I had there was no internet, so I had to call librarians, hospitals, and there was nothing. There was zilch for me to read about anything about young onset. I was in the 1 percentile at the time, and I think now I'd be in the 2 percentile, but which is still pretty low.
Yeah.
But
if you go out on the internet without somebody who scouted it for you, there's some scary stuff out there, and you don't need to be reading it.
And I was on, we were in some reputable sites, and we actually had to call sites to tell them to take that down, because that's incorrect information about pallidotomies and some of the things that the ancient
stuff that we're not doing today.
Yes. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
And so, and that's the struggle is, those mental health responses or reactions to that. And, the struggle becomes, and you said it, right, that you get the diagnosis and they go, here's your Cinemet. I'll see you in 6 months.
Yeah.
And what about the question of how are you feeling even at the second visit, right? The next visit you come, the question might be effective. How's your mental health? How are you coping?
Well, was that, I said between there's a lot of time between well, especially your first, you should see your doctor at least a few times if you're first diagnosed, not just a few not just wait 3 months and see him and see how you're doing. Here's a paper. Not you can call me later. Call me in 3 months, or come see me in 3 months. Yeah. There's a lot of time between a doctor visit and what you can be doing for yourself between those visits. And if you're not doing it, and you're not talking to your doctor about what you're doing between those visits, there's something wrong, because you have to be doing something for yourself.
Yeah, but if you just got diagnosed, where do you start? You need kind of one of those dancing charts they used to have, where to put your feet into the dance, the dance moves. Yeah, and if you don't have something like that, or you don't have a buddy or know someone in the community who can kind of support you, or even one-on-one, because even going into a support group is really kind of scary, because you see all these different versions, like as we were talking, when you see one person with Parkinson's, it's one person.
Well, and that's what, when I've talked with Gavin, that's the thing, is we talk about why aren't there more early onset Parkinson's support groups? Because what typically happens in most communities, you've got a PD support group. Mm-hmm. And if you're early onset and you walk in there, what you see is a room full of people who are 75 years old, who may look like that picture of Parkinson's that we see. Mm-hmm. And you go, holy crap, this is what I've got to look forward to. And you shut it down and you go, I'm not going. And so where does that population go, right? To get their needs fulfilled and their information needs met. And it's a struggle. And I get it. I totally get it.
Well, and then how do you balance that, Brad, with, I got to hold down my job. I have children at home I have to take care of. I've got college tuition to pay for. I've got, all these things that are on my list already. And now I got to add this to it. And how do I make time to get my mental health help? How do I figure out how to take these meds so that, we had friends who starved themselves because they didn't want to eat protein because it affected their Cinemet, and they, so they'd wait till nighttime to even have anything that looked like a meal, because that was the only way they could cope with it.
Yeah. And it's tough, right? Because all of those things you just mentioned, Angela, are tough for any of us to deal with. But now you're throwing in a chronic disease that's incurable and we know is going to progress. It's never going to go backwards. And so many begin to evaluate, how can I stay in the workforce? A big question that I've done a couple of talks on is the employment issue in Parkinson's. Do I tell my employer that I have Parkinson's disease? Disclosure is a big deal, because if it comes to a point that I need accommodations which are guaranteed by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the only way I can get those is to disclose. But if I disclose, I run the risk of being discriminated against. Because here's the fallacy that many people fall into. There are protections under the ADA for employment for people with disabilities, and Parkinson's disease fits that, right? However, a boss can choose to fire somebody for any reason they want to. They just wouldn't say it's because the man or woman has Parkinson's. They're going to go, you just weren't doing your job well, so I'm letting you go.
Right.
And so that's the fear of, do I do that? And so you've got to think about that. You think about, do I share this with my kids, depending on their age, right? Add that fear to my kid's life that mommy or daddy is going down this path. And, you know, then your social interactions and all of those things that I can only imagine flood your mind. And how do I cope, right? Coping is a big deal. And there are a variety of ways that people cope, right? There's problem focused and there's emotion focused, are usually the two types that you hear about. And, you know, really, if I talk to my students here about coping, it really comes down to what's adaptive versus what's maladaptive. And the best example I can give is my students will say, is drinking alcohol adaptive or maladaptive coping? And like many questions I get, I say yes, right? Because if you come home in the evening and you have dinner and you have a glass of wine and you chill out and then you do your evening, I would probably argue that that's adaptive. That's not causing issues. Now, if you come home and have 3 bottles of wine and you can't get up to go to work in the morning, now that becomes a different issue.
Yeah.
But I think with kind of back to your question about all of these things that you're dealing with, kids, college funds, work, social, it becomes what type of a coping strategy do I have, and is it effective? Can I deal with the anxiety that's associated with this? Because that, I can only imagine how that's anxiety provoking. All this stuff, how can I deal with it all? I can't be responsible for everything. Counseling's a big deal.
Stress,
yeah.
anxiety, the unknown. The unknown affects everybody, but then the unknown with Parkinson's and and insurance.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't even talked about spousal stuff or partner stuff and
family relationships.
Right. And the way we see each other after a diagnosis like that. Is it, you know, less than versus,
how do you,
you know, when you walked in the office, there wasn't, you know, now I'm less than, then people start labeling themselves that they're not what they were. Well, you just, all you did was hear some words, you know, a half hour ago, you were okay. You know, you were kind of making it along. And how to deal with that, like you said, the fear component, the absolute fear.
And that's the piece that, you know, the one thing that happens often is the social role in the home changes, right? You may have one person who's the primary breadwinner and the other person who takes care of the home. It doesn't necessarily mean one's a woman and one's a man. It's irrelevant. Maybe you're both primary. Maybe you both work. But when you lose one income, that's a big deal if you're counting on both. Or if you're the one who was the only one working, and now that income begins to go down, spouse has to say, we've got to make some changes. Maybe as someone becomes less physically able to do things, other spouse has to pick up the slack in those areas. And we can see what happens with that is sometimes there can be resentment, right? The spouse who doesn't have Parkinson's can begin to go, man, I didn't sign up for this. All of a sudden now doesn't mean you don't love your spouse.
Right.
It's a fairly natural reaction when everything gets flipped upside down and you go, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't know that I was going to have to be responsible for everything. You know, Gavin talks about it with his wife, you know, earlier on, that she was the one who began working and she's taking care of everything. And he's trying just to manage his disease. And
which is a
There's so
full-time
many
job.
It's a lot. I mean, I give up driving at 30. So I realized that when I was driving with Parkinson's, I realized my life is I'm gonna have to change my I've got to dodge. Things I can't. Um, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that I'm not going to be. I'm not going to. I don't want to hit. I don't want to make an accident. I don't hit somebody. I don't get sued, and I don't want. I don't want to drive with her and injure my wife, and I don't want to injure myself and be a hindrance,
Danger.
a danger to the community. But and then I realized that I'm not. I can't. I won't be. I probably won't be able to do. Maybe able to play tennis. Okay, as a sport, but I'm not gonna. I'll never be. I'll never be a pro tennis player. I'll never be. There's some things like I can and can't do, and now it's time to pivot, and that's really what it changes your life, and it took me a while to find the right.
Well, even though Karl and I met after his diagnosis, as you said earlier, Brad, it just keeps marching on. So there's always these shifts, and it takes a long time to pivot, like you said, Karl. Well, one day you can do the dishes without any assistance, but then the next day you're so off at the same time that you can't even stand up straight. I tell Karl all the time that dishwasher can wait to be unloaded because you can't stand up. If you fall backwards and hit your head on the countertop, it's game over. And it's not about the dishes in the dishwasher, so you have to, it takes a long time to figure out how to do these pivots, and you have to make these lots and lots of choices every single day based on, is it a good day? Is it a bad day? Is it a mediocre day? And
every day's a good day. Every day you get a bed is a good day.
Right. And that leads to, if you were to ask me, we kind of go back to the first question you talked about, Karl, is what are the things that differentiate people with Parkinson's disease? And one thing that I think is critical is acceptance of the condition, right? It doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you're okay with it. It just means, hey, it is what it is and I can't change it. Now let's deal with it. Because until, and again, Angela, you mentioned, we talked earlier about the AA model and a sponsor and help, that's for somebody who's in recovery, acceptance of their condition is critical.
Yeah.
Same thing with anything else we're dealt with in life. Doesn't mean I have to like it. I may come into work and the dean of my college has some policy that I think is ridiculous, but I got to accept it if I want to continue working here. Right. So, and that's part of it. And then learning how to accept it, to just say, this is what I was dealt. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it's not fair. Life's not fair. So we don't need to have that argument, right? But it, like you said, Karl, it doesn't mean my life is over. It just means here's a new chapter. Here are some things. I've got an opportunity to do some things that I probably never would have had a chance of doing before.
Exactly.
Meet people, meet some great people that I never would have met without PD. And most importantly, make a difference in someone else's life through your disease. Exactly. That's it, right? I mean, and that's what you guys do. And that's what so many people in this community do, is you find your purpose.
Right.
Your purpose is to share my experience, share the hope that I've garnered, share the information that I have, so that somebody who finds themselves in a similar situation says, this is the only person who I've ever heard who understands me. And now they have hope and they begin to accept, move on, and then they do that for someone else. And it just works, right? It work over and over.
And that's I think that's what we're all doing, is sharing important information, and I think sharing information can bring hope, and I think that's
well, we don't have to have the full answer, even just a little tiny piece.
Yeah.
Just one little thing may be the way that it gives us a different direction and a different perspective, I think, because people say, I've had care partners say, how do you do it? I just put one foot in front of the other. If you think I have a playbook, I have a few moves here and there, but for the most part, you just have to kind of. We were part of an online support group today, and a new person came who'd only been diagnosed for a couple months, and he was in the construction business, and he said, it depends on what team shows up. And I was like, that is perfect. That is absolutely perfect. What team is going to show up today? Even 5 minutes, a half hour, or whatever. Play the team you get.
Well, that leads into the question. We
one of the 2 pages of notes we got here.
we're being in this industry, if you want to call it an industry, for this long. You hear stories about, well, Edna and I had plans, and we were to do this and that, and now we can't do this and can't do that. But you can get hit by a bus in 10 minutes going on the street, and that's going to wreck your plans too. We all have plans. Parkinson's is no different than any other crisis in some ways than changing your plans. That's why that's pivoting once again. Is be flexible, resilient, and have a backup plan. And with Parkinson's, you have to have a backup plan to your backup plan.
What you share, I think about it in the vernacular that I use, and that's psychological flexibility. Mm-hmm. And that's the ability to pivot. When things are thrown at you in life, am I able to change on the fly? Am I able to deal with these new things? Or do I let them bog me down, which leads to just inaction, right? And the other one you mentioned is resilience, right? Resilience is something that's great because it's teachable. And much of the literature on resilience shows that it's something that can be cumulative. So as you've experienced things in your life, each time you bounce back, you develop more of it. And resilience, just so that everyone's clear, is when you are dealt something like Parkinson's disease, you end up taking a step back at that moment, right? You kind of shut down, you psychologically, mentally, you are down for a little while. But resilience is the ability to bounce back to where you were before. And there's another construct that's very similar called post-traumatic growth, which is even a step beyond resilience. And we see this a lot, right? And post-traumatic growth says, not only do I bounce back to where I was before, I'm better than I was before as a result. And Frankl would call it flourishing despite suffering. Mm-hmm. So you've gone through this suffering, you've dealt with it, you've battled it, and now you've said, all right, I'm ready to move on. And you've got some new skills that you didn't have before. The ability to handle stressors in life, the ability to be knocked down and get back up, right? And that's another area that we're looking into in the PD world is, are there differences in this post-traumatic growth with people with PD? Yes, the answer is yes to that. But what is it that makes people different with that? Is it a personality characteristic? Is it the number of adverse events that they've experienced in their life? I'm not sure. Is it a belief in a spiritual higher power? I promise you that plays a role. I just don't know how much of a role.
Well, Brad, as the consummate care partner, I'm going to throw another one in, is the people that you have around you. How does that factor in to the resilience, the flourishing despite suffering? If you have people around you that are, adding to this resiliency and the flourishing, does that help you rise faster or go even beyond, or does it do the opposite?
Bring you down,
where you end up
Well, they're surrounded by the wrong people. Are they bringing you down? Or are they making things worse for you?
And that's the point, Karl, right? So we know the role of social support. Social support is huge. You know, we know loneliness, social isolation. I wrote a chapter with Indu about that, and we know the effects of those things. But we also know that when you're, like you said, Karl, when you're surrounded by the right people, that social support is essential for everything mental health, for depression, for anxiety, for resilience, post-traumatic growth, all of those things. And there's no doubt the literature shows what that is. And it's always quality over quantity. It's not that I'm surrounded by 100 people. It's that I've got 1, 2, 5 that really are there to support me, right? We get mixed up with this idea of, I got to have a ton of people around me. You don't. Sometimes it just takes that one person who's really close to you, who's your rock, who's your solid person, who you know they're there for you no matter what. No matter what's going on, I can go to that person. They're going to give me hope. They're going to help me have optimism, and they're going to push me to be the best version of me. And so, yeah, that it's so critical to have that. And not everybody does, right? And therein lies the value of, if you don't have it, find a support group, get involved, because that's what we need.
Find the right support group, because
yeah, great point.
Because I went through a series of support groups and couldn't find the right one, and I had to create my own to it lasted for 12 years, and it was great. But yeah.
Well, even via Zoom. I mean, there's even if you can't get out of your house, you can find one online that can be
definitely very helpful.
And it's not that the whole relationship has to be online, but at least it would be the start of something, to find people that you could have that exchange with, and some.
And if it's the wrong support group online, create your own. There are people that what want to do, at least I've been in a support group for a while that people were woe is me and dominators, but so it's been a while since I've been. Most of the ones have been well governed.
But also, I'll make a pitch for, it doesn't have to necessarily be a Parkinson support group. If you have a faith group at your church, whatever 100%. Denomination you go to,
we're good friends.
Yes, exactly. You can find something that would feed your soul and feed that part of yourself. That
absolutely. And it may be 2 different groups. You may have a PD support group that helps you with your PD information, asking questions about the disease progression. What do I do about X, Y, and Z? But then I have this other group that's my social group. That this group these are the folks that I go to dinner with, that I go to a play with, that I have over to my house to watch a football, basketball, whatever game, right? So there aren't any rules. It's finding your people, right? That's what I say. It's people whom you are attracted to, and who are also attracted to you, and you can actually let down that veil, and you can be vulnerable with someone else, which is really tough in our world. It's hard to find people who are willing to do that. But when you do, that's when a real connection happens.
Well, and now I can call you Brad.
Yeah, exactly. That's not me. That's absolutely no.
I don't know. He's still reviewing you.
I'll let you know when we're done, Karl.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
And the other example of this is the importance of laughter, right? Being able to laugh. Yeah, this is a chronic illness that's incurable, but there are still things in life that happen that should make us laugh. And, it's important to still enjoy other people and have fun. And, it hasn't taken away your sense of humor, Karl, right? So,
well,
it's changed it, but it hasn't taken it away.
Well, according to Angela, I'm not that funny. So,
I beg to differ. Listen to Angela.
Well, thank you.
And I, I don't even know how either one of us does. Well, and laugh at some of the ridiculousness. Because I mean, everybody has a ridiculous part of their day somewhere along the way.
Everyone's got some sort of baggage. Everyone's got something to worry about. Something.
Sometimes you can either laugh or cry.
Yeah.
Right. And it's I would much prefer to laugh.
I do too.
You know, I think Jim Valvano, when he died years ago, he talked about being moved to tears every day. I would add to that to be moved to laughter every day.
Yeah.
I have an inspiration channel on YouTube. Two of my favorite things on my channel are a wonderful happiness talk by Alan Watts. It was a really great, a really great 15-minute talk on happiness.
We'll put it in the comments below, Karl.
And Jim Valvano's speech at the ESPYs.
Grab a box of tissues, because it makes me cry every time I watch it.
It's so moving, but it's such an example of a guy that is at the end, but he's still passionate.
Yeah.
He hasn't lost that yet. Still had the ability to move other people to action. Right. So we know it's never too late. I've always heard the saying, if you're not dead, God's not done.
Yeah.
And there's always more work to be done in our lives. And what an example, right?
Yeah.
And to pass it on. I mean, just utterly talk about vulnerability. That whole speech of his is nothing but vulnerability. He had no governor for anything. He was just ready to put it out on the table for everybody.
And I went to Carolina.
Yeah.
And you got over that.
Yeah. But that's what happens when we're vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
It draws people in. It says that person is relatable. They're real.
Even if he did coach at NC State.
Gotcha.
I know. We can talk about that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. I'm good with sports too. So we're
exactly. I know. Brad went to Kentucky.
I did spend 2 years at UGA.
But you're happy after last night.
Yes.
In what was called a game. I'm not sure.
I don't want to offend any of our friends that live in Texas.
I mean, I'm 30 miles from TCU, so people here were rooting heavily.
And I went to a WVU, so Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun last night for about 5 minutes. But
there's a lot of sadness there today for sure. Well, and Brad, I think maybe one last, there have been a lot of points, but maybe one last point. We're going to have a series. We decided.
I want to get into habits and routines and choices and attitude.
But I think this quality of life piece and the spirituality piece is something we haven't really totally talked a lot about, but we did talk about it before we started recording, and of course we didn't record it. But I truly believe the power of spirituality, whatever spirituality practice you have, or if you don't even have a practice, you just have certain beliefs, is tremendously powerful. And was hoping you could say a little bit about that, how that factors into your research.
Yeah. You know, so you guys know, one of the areas that I'm passionate about is meaning in life. And, you know, meaning and purpose are sometimes synonymous, but nonetheless, I don't have to get into all of that. But clearly, if you look at the literature that talks about what are the things that make someone's life meaningful? The top 3 things in almost every study are spirituality, relationships, and work. And most people would agree with that, right? And there's a reason that spirituality continually pops up on that list. One thing is it's available to everyone, right? There's not a prescribed method to establish spirituality, you know, and we're not talking about religiosity. Those are two very different words. Spirituality is a personal connection or belief that I have with a higher power. And you get to define that. That's why it's effective. You could be Muslim, you could be Christian. It doesn't matter. And so I think that's the value. We look at our world and how important religion is around the world. And it's those spiritual beliefs that people have underneath that auspice of religion that change people's lives. And part of the reason that I believe it's so important is I've personally seen it with people I care about. I shared about my mom. There's no doubt in my mind that her life would be qualitatively different if she didn't have a relationship with God. That's the thing that makes her get out of bed every morning. And not only that, but when one has a spiritual belief, spirituality frequently is done in community. And you mentioned that, Angela, earlier on. It doesn't have to be a PD support group. It might be a spiritual support group. And I know, again, from my mom, the people whom she hangs out with on a daily basis are people from her church. Super common, right? That those are the type. And when you hang around with people who have that spiritual connection, they have a different attitude. Their demeanor is different. They're positive. They're happy. They're optimistic. They know that there's more to life than what we're dealing with right now in this world that's finite. And go ahead, Karl.
I was just, I agree. I totally agree with what you're saying, but I also think that you go one step further, that you could be a pantheist, and that Thomas Jefferson's religion of
Nature.
of appreciating nature, the love of nature, the love of another, a commitment. It doesn't go as deep as some people are torn by religion, and I think you can be an atheist even, and still have be spiritual.
Yeah. And when you look at, again, back to the literature on meaning in life, when you look at how do people develop that, again, I said spirituality is one of the top three, right? Spirituality, relationships, work. There are others, hobbies, nature. People find a spiritual connection when they're out sitting on a park bench, watching leaves blow.
Art.
Yep. Crafts, hobbies. And that's why anytime I'm talking to someone about, because meaning in life can be taught. And really what it is look at this list of things. Find something in your life that you say, that's what drives me. I love that. That's what gives my life meaning. Do more of it, right? That's how you get it. And whether that's spirituality, whether that's taking walks in nature, whether that's joining a group that does pottery making or drawing pictures, right? Because that's another big area in research in PD right now, is the creativity piece. Dance for PD, art classes, right? There's something going on there with dopaminergic treatment that affects creativity in a positive way. That's what the literature's showing us. So yeah, I think there are a lot of ways that you can find that piece. But I just say it's important that everyone find it, whatever it is.
Well, and Brad, I think we have to get people to look for it. If that fear shuts them down, how do we nurture them to start looking and keep looking until they find the one or two or three things that may be that part. We need to take out the barriers so that they don't stop looking and don't give up. And whether they're early onset or later onset, it's not over.
It's a sense of purpose. And if you can't paint anymore, then try photography. If you can't, once again, pivoting, I think trying to find focusing on what you can do and
Well, we have a friend who was a photographer who did it as a profession. And then as his Parkinson's advanced, he just changed the type of photography he did. He went from, being in a studio with lights and still objects to these moving images that are kind of blurred to some extent, but still extremely powerful, So he pivoted his profession into his hobby, into his art, and still very passionate about it and still moving photography. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the only limitation I think is
your mind.
Your mind.
Is what we put on ourselves.
Right.
Right. Because it's there. And the biggest challenge I see is early onset, not early age, but when you're diagnosed, right? Early in your disease process, when you may still be in that state of denial. Because denial is a way that people cope. And early on, denial is considered can be an adaptive coping mechanism because it prevents the flood of negative emotions that could potentially happen. And so when you're in denial, you're less apt to go look for these things that might make a difference in my life because you say, I don't need them. I'm okay. I might have Parkinson's, or maybe I don't. Maybe the guy was wrong. And when it becomes maladaptive is when I become symptomatic and I begin having issues that I'm not willing to go get treated or not willing to leave my house, then it becomes a problem. And that's the tough place, is when you've got that apathy, someone just says, I give up, my life's over. And that's where that social support, that network, those people come in who can encourage and say, come with me. I'll walk with you the whole way. And that's why that's so critical.
Well, Brad, that leads me to the question of the people that have Parkinson's and are unable to tell people or tell their boss that they have Parkinson's and have the anxiety of having to not tell. Something about coming out and telling people you have Parkinson's. It's a breath of fresh air. Say I have Parkinson's and I can.
Ooh, I don't have to hide it anymore.
The stress is out. Is there any research on how that affects the patient?
Not in Parkinson's disease.
No.
In the disability literature, if you look across the board at any disability, there's something freeing about disclosure after it's done, but there's the anxiety piece that precedes it. When you're thinking about, here's how this could go, and you begin not to do it. But, Angela, I go back to before we started recording, you were talking about the world of recovery in AA. It's analogous. Something happens when someone is struggling with a substance and they finally get to that point where they say, I am an alcoholic, a drug addict, a gambling addict, fill in the blank. It's all the same. But something freeing happens when you can say that, because now you begin to go, all right, because you can't fix a problem you can't identify.
Yeah.
Once we identify the problem, we go, all right, now it's time to go to work. Let's see what I need to do to fix this. And, that's part of the thing with employment is eventually accommodations are frequently necessary. Sometimes you might need something other than a keyboard. You might need voice to text to be able to do a job if you type a lot. And you might need breaks during your day. You might need some flexible work hours where you maybe work from home sometimes and you work from the office sometimes, which COVID has been wonderful for, right?
Right.
But something that we probably would have never gone to, but now that we've done it, we go, people can actually do their work from home.
Right.
But I think it's one of those things that is critical, and the only person who knows when the right time to disclose is the individual. As a counselor, you can't tell someone you need to go to your work and disclose, because when your work is beginning to slip and you're not as effective. I saw many people when I was at VCU who would come into clinic and they would still be actively working and they would say, you know what, my trimmer's getting worse. And when people are in my office, I'm always having to hold my hand because I don't want my fellow employees to notice or my boss to notice. I know I'm getting close to having to tell. And, you know, it's a personal decision and it's a scary decision. And I wish I could say that when you disclose, things always work out, but that would be naive, because they don't always.
No.
But what I can tell you also is it's probably not going to work out if you don't disclose and your disease is affecting your work, because then someone's going to go, you're not getting your work done. We're going to let you go.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
Yeah.
It's just one of those other additive things that you throw on this pile that causes anxiety and stress and depression and apathy and fatigue, demoralization, all of that stuff. And you go, when does it end?
Yeah.
When does it end? And it's tough. It really is.
Yeah, we would be naive to say that any of this is easy. This is, you know, there's so much of it that, we were just, the support group we were on today was talking about Dave Iverson's book, Winter Stars, and his caregiving role for his mother. And he admits that. He's like, I thought I could handle it. I had plans and everything. And then then I got in it and I lost my temper. I yelled at her. I did these things and I'm shocked that I did them. But anybody can be pushed to the brink at any time, whether it's the person living with the condition or the care partner. And it's okay, but you have to acknowledge that, it's happening, and, that maybe you need some additional help. Maybe you need some counseling, some supportive services.
The care partner needs the same things as the person with Parkinson's does. You need a support group. You need time that you can go, you know what, tonight I just need to go out and be with some friends of mine to recoup, right? And, the biggest thing, one of the struggles is continuing to always have grace for one another, right? Because it's hard to be the person with Parkinson's and it's hard to be the caregiver of a person with Parkinson's. You're both going to make mistakes. You're both going to say things that are irritating, except Karl.
That's another series. I'm going to talk to Brad by myself.
Yeah. But the key is to say, we're both doing the best we can and we're human. Yeah. And you know what? What I've had to learn in my life is you learn to say, I'm sorry. When you're wrong, you just say, I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? Say it. I'm sorry that I spoke to you that way. That was not okay. Usually when you do that, the other person goes, I forgive you, right? Just acknowledge it, that we're human and we're going to make mistakes. And I could go home and tell my wife, I go, you know what? I love you, but I promise you, I'm going to say something hurtful to you in the next 24 hours, probably. Just because I'm a human and I'm a guy. Yep. That's what we do. Right, Karl? Well, except for you.
Well,
we talk about this off camera, Brad.
Yeah. Okay. You want to keep your reputation intact.
Over a beer.
Yeah.
Fuzzies, yeah. Back to fuzzies.
I have a whole other thing.
Did we cover even a quarter of the stuff that we got on the piece of paper?
It was great. I mean, this could go on for hours, right?
It could, yeah. We're gonna have to do this.
Not to mention the important movie of Stutz. If you've seen Stutz, yeah,
I have.
And we just heard a great talk with Ken Sheldon on
Hidden Brain. NPR's Hidden Brain. Excellent.
Awesome talk. Do you know him?
I know the name. I don't know him though.
Yeah, very interesting talk.
But we're gonna have to table that to the next time we get together.
It's been such a pleasure talking with you both.
It's been a pleasure talking to you as well. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your continued support to the community and the work that you're doing with Indu and Boss and the whole plethora of a excellent Parkinson's community.
And hopefully we haven't severed our relationship. Hopefully you'll still talk to us again.
I'll have to think about it, but
okay.
I feel pretty good.
Good. Excellent.